All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Today we are doing another episode, যেটা আমাদের 8th episode of the whole 10 webinar series with Education US and ESAP. Today we have a very interesting session, যেটাতে আমাদের US ইউনিভার্সিটির একজন রেপ জয়েন করবে আমাদের ইউনিভার্সিটি অফ Oregon State University, Lindsay আমাদের সাথে জয়েন করবে. She visited Bangladesh quite a few years back, and then now she's working with OSU, Oregon State University, and she's working for the graduate department. And that's why we wanted to invite her, because she has the first-hand experience of dealing with graduate application, and she's the best person to tell you what you need to do, how you should prepare yourself. So I think we'll be joining with. Hi, Lindsay. So I just joined and I was talking about you. All the good stuff so far. Don't worry. So I'd like to thank you again for making it happen so quickly. It was just a Facebook chat, and then now we are here. So thank you so much for being so flexible. I was telling you how we met 5-6 years back, and then we've been in touch, and now you're working for the graduate student. So this group, Engineering Students Association of Bangladesh, they are a wonderful platform for all the engineering students of Bangladesh. They used to do robotics championship. Now they have gone even broader. They work in different fields, but I know the fact that this is a wonderful platform for all the students who are studying engineering and who consider their future study for engineering. So that was the main reason I wanted to bring him in here, because I know that you have the first-hand experience to work with the graduate student and everything. So I would like to ask you to introduce yourself to the students, to the audience, so they have a sense that who are you and what you're working with.
Sure. So as mentioned, my name is Lindsay. I am the recruitment director for the graduate school at Oregon State University. And I've been working in higher education for quite some time, so probably about a decade now. I started off in international admissions. So as mentioned, I've traveled all around the world, been to every continent but Antarctica, traveled a bit in South Asia. I always enjoyed going there. And let's see, I would say maybe 3 years ago, I switched and moved actually to be a graduate advisor for an engineering program at the University of Arizona. And that's where I first started working. I worked in the optical sciences program. And in December, decided to move to another public institution that has a lot to do with STEM. So now I live in Corvallis, Oregon with Oregon State University. And I'll let you know that every now and then you might see a cat tail come up. My pet cat really enjoys being in videos. So if you see him, that's what that is.
Nice. That's nice. We'll happy to have a glimpse. So like I was saying that it was my privilege. I was lucky to visit Portland, Oregon, and I was in Oregon State University. And even though it has been like 3-4 years, but I still remember it was a huge university. And we got to see so many departments and so many research happen in Oregon State University, I believe. And when I came back, I came to know that my neighbor who just lived beside me, he was applying for Oregon State University PhD program, and he's doing his PhD now, right? So that was all coincidental. So let us start our session by asking very relevant question. I know there are a lot of students here who are thinking at this moment that as a graduate student, how should they start their preparation if they are planning to start graduate study in the US? How would you suggest them, or what would be your advice to them?
Sure. So the first big thing that's a little confusing if you've seen the process about applying to a university in the United States for an undergraduate degree for bachelor's compared to a master's is undergraduate, you apply to the university, and no matter what major you choose, it's the same process, same scholarships. At the graduate level, every program actually gets to determine their own admission standards. There's general standards for the whole university, but you might apply, let's say, to mechanical engineering and civil engineering, and they might have some different processes for what you need to do to apply, what kind of documents you need, what are the deadlines to apply, when they will admit students. That's another good point to have in mind, especially if you're interested in a PhD program. Sometimes graduate programs will only admit one time a year. So you'll want to pay attention to that. And also pay attention to the deadlines to apply. So for example, our school starts in September for fall admission, but the deadline to apply usually is in December of the year before. So for fall 2020, students who applied to the PhD were applying in December 2019. So keep that in mind for timing, that you'll probably need to take a GRE exam, TOEFL or IELTS, get all the documents prepared for your application. You'll be admitted, and then you'll need to go through the visa process. So you want to really start planning ahead of time. And then also with the funding options, that's usually by program as well. So you might apply to 2 engineering programs, but the funding might be different between those 2. So my biggest recommendation is you really need to do your research before you apply to a program. And the other recommendation that I have is, you'll see, especially at large public institutions like mine, we have 15 different types of engineering, but we also have 90 other majors and minors to choose from. So think outside of the box when it comes to the title of the program that you're interested in. So for example, at our school, we have a major in material science, but we also have a major in wood science. And wood science actually has to do with engineering as well, and deals with material science. So really think about, at the graduate level, since it's more niche of what you're studying, what are you interested in? And then really scan through all of the programs to make sure that you're not limiting yourself to something that might actually be a better fit for you for applying to a graduate program.
Right. I didn't think this question earlier, but it just came to me. You were saying that it's important that you apply early, right? For example, say that one university's deadline is till March, but does it help if the student apply within December, early in the cycle? Does it help for funding or any other aspect if you get to apply early from your cycle?
Yeah, so what I recommend doing is, again, you're going to hear me say this a lot, but it all depends on the program. When you're looking at the program's webpage, they'll usually put a general application deadline, so the very last chance that you have to apply. But sometimes they'll have a priority deadline. And so that would be a little bit earlier. And when you do the priority deadline, that's when you have a better chance to get funding, if that's offered through your program. That's when you have a better chance to be reviewed. But don't feel that if you're the very first person to apply and the deadline is 3 months later, it doesn't mean that you get a chance 100% for sure because you applied early. So my other recommendation is, look at what those deadlines are and really take your time with the application. If you rush through it and just try to be the first one to apply, they're going to be reviewing. Sometimes they review everybody at the same time, whether you're the first or the last person in that application cycle to apply. So really take your time with each piece of the application. But again, you really have to check the deadlines for each program you're applying to. I always recommend to maybe put together an Excel sheet that has the priority deadline or the funding deadline, the application deadline, what items do you need. It just helps to keep track, because every single program that you're going to apply to, even at the same institution, sometimes will be different.
Exactly. So students who attended few earlier sessions, I would like to grab your attention when we had a student, another Bangladeshi student studying in the US, and he said the same thing, that have an Excel sheet, right? It's so important that you have a written document, or you have a document where you can put all of your information. Because like Lindsay said, it's so important that you follow the priority deadline, right? I tell all of my advisors that do not go for a rushed application. You might think that, oh my God, I always used to submit my class assignment at the very beginning. So I would do the same thing here. It might happen, and it's so easy to get carried away with these things, right? However, you might, when you are doing it, you might not be checking your SOP another time. You might not be seeing your recommendation letter address another time. So all these small things you might be missing. So if it's a priority deadline, try to meet that deadline. However, don't rush with your application so that it doesn't reach with the quality you would have expected, because for graduate program, so many scholarship and funding is at stake, and you do not want to mess it up, right? Assistantships, funding. So please be careful. All right, thank you, Lindsay. My next question is, with the engineering student, I'm sure there are so many opportunities for them to do research work, project, and often they might be confused between doing a master's or PhD. So what would be your take that if the student has just finished their bachelor's, should they try for PhD straight away, or should they try for master's?
Good question. So I would have this discussion a lot with my students when I worked in optical sciences, which again is a type of engineering. What I recommend to students is there's a lot of different things that you'll want to think about. The first one is, what are your ultimate goals for a career? Do you want to work in Bangladesh, somewhere in South Asia, someplace else? What are those careers looking for in terms of a degree? So for example, in the United States, there's some jobs that really are just looking for a master's degree in engineering. And some jobs, surprisingly, that look down on a PhD because it's so niche when you get, it's so specific when you get to a PhD. So depending on what your goals are, what I recommend doing is you can even just look online to the websites of those companies that you're interested in, see what they're asking for a requirement to apply. Because the other big thing is a time commitment. When you're doing a master's degree, in the US, it takes about 2 years. When you're doing a PhD, it can take 5 to 7 years, depending on the program that you're doing.
Exactly.
So do you want to commit all of that time? If it's for your goal and you need to have a PhD, then you're probably willing to commit all that time. If what you need just needs a master's, why spend the extra time for that? The other thing to think about is, I will say that usually with PhD, there are more funding options in the United States, but that doesn't mean that you can't be funded at the master's level as well. So there's 2 ways you can look at that. You might have more opportunities for funding for a PhD, but again, you're going to, usually with our program for assistantships, you get tuition covered, health insurance, and a stipend, a small stipend for the time that you're working. And that's for master's or PhD if you're able to get that position. But also think you have a cost of living. If you have a family, you have to pay for your family for 5 to 7 years. So it kind of can go both ways. It really depends on what your situation is, what financial situation you have for funding and guaranteed funding in their program, what the cost of living is in the place that you're going. And yeah, so that's kind of my take on a master's or PhD. It really is determinant of what is going to be best for you. And really think about that before you go ahead. And there's 2 ways you can think about it. One is you can always do a master's and later apply to a PhD program if you decide that is the route that you need to take. And then there are some times where people will start with a PhD and end up just leaving with a master's degree. So there's so many different situations that can happen. But again, think of what's best for you, what are your career goals, and what type of degree is needed to reach that career goal.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. That helps. So like you've been saying, funding and again, what are the usual funding options for graduate students?
Yeah. So just be aware that studying in the United States, it's not guaranteed that every single position for a graduate is funded. So you'll want to do your research about each program to see, is it guaranteed for the time that you're in the program? Is it maybe just for a year, or it's competitive? The main way that funding happens at the graduate level is through an assistantship. So you might have heard the term research assistant or teaching assistant. So this is what I was talking about, where you are hired by the university to do research with your faculty member, your major professor is what we call it at Oregon State, or to help teach a class to undergraduate students or do grading. In exchange, we cover your tuition. We cover the health insurance, which is required as an international student in the US, and we give you a stipend for living. So that's the primary one that you'll read about and hear about, and probably the option that you would be offered, especially in STEM. So the good thing is there's a lot of research opportunity in STEM.
Exactly.
So you have a better chance than if you were doing, let's say, anthropology major. And then another option is a fellowship. These are usually from an external organization, and you'll have to check with what you're able to do as an international student. A big one is the National Science Foundation, but there's other programs as well, but sometimes the universities will have this. A fellowship is similar to an assistantship in the sense that you usually will get a stipend, health insurance, and tuition covered, but you're not employed by the university. So it's kind of like a scholarship in a sense. And in the end, you just have to show some kind of results. So a fellowship and assistantship, they're confusing, but that's how they're different. Is one, you're hired by the university officially, which is the assistantship, and the fellowship is more like a scholarship with the perks of that.
Exactly. That's what we usually say, that there is no work obligation for fellowship program.
Exactly.
So we get a lot of, whenever we say that, students ask us how we get fellowship. So how do you usually, based on what usually students get fellowship, Lindsay?
Yeah, so I recommend checking on the university's website of where you're applying, and they might have a list of fellowships. Again, sometimes those are initiated by the university itself. So we have a few of those listed on our program page, and it will be a fellowship for that particular one. You can also look externally, so you can just Google, fellowships in the United States for international students or something like that.
Okay, all right.
Google is a mighty tool.
I know.
And then some other funding options are, there might be some scholarships that are available. Again, usually it's through the program. So you can check on their website to see if they have a scholarship. So that won't usually cover everything, but you'll get some kind of money amount that will go to that. And then the last two kind of options is, the scary one is a loan, where you could take out a loan and you have to pay it back. But that's an option if it will help you reach your goals. You put the investment up front, but then you're making that money back later in your career. And the last one is just an on-campus job, which usually won't pay a lot. It'll probably be close to minimum wage. But as an international student, you can work up to 20 hours a week on campus. And that's just another way to get some money, though, that can help you out with your books, or if you want to go out to eat and stuff like that. So those are the different options that you have available to you. But again, don't just assume automatically that you will be fully funded if you come to the U.S. for a graduate degree. You really need to do your research to see what is required for your budgeting for that.
Exactly. No, I absolutely agree. The thing you mentioned about that there are some on-campus jobs, right? So I was wondering, is it possible for a student who have already secured some assistantship and then go and in addition to that, they can get some on-campus jobs? Is it possible?
Good question. So in the United States, international students are only allowed to be hired by the university. So you can't, go to the restaurant down the street and apply there. It has to be something on campus. And there's only a certain amount of hours that you're allowed to be hired. So usually, honestly, if you get an assistantship, there's no need to have that extra on-campus job. And that will take away from your hours from assistantship, where, like I said, on-campus job will be minimum wage, which is like $10 or $11, I think, right now.
Right, exactly.
Compared to an assistantship, which covers all your tuition, covers all your health insurance, and then gives you some money for your living expenses. So there's not really a need to do double, I guess.
Right. Of course. So my next question, I'm sure a lot of students here, since they are engineering students, they are very much interested on further research work. So for you, what are the opportunities for students to do research?
So again, the advantage that you have is you're coming into a STEM field, which usually has a lot of funding and opportunities for research. Again, I'm going to talk about every program is different, but you'll want to check with the program to see what the setup is. So some programs for graduate, you need to identify your faculty advisor before you even apply. So basically what that means is you look on the website of the program that you're interested in. Excuse me, give me 1 second. Air is dry here right now. You look on the program website and you look at the faculty and you think about what you're planning to, what you want to focus in your graduate degree. Because that's a big difference usually to undergrad to grad, is you're becoming an expert in a particular part of engineering or whatever you decide to study. And so what you might have to do is you'll go to the faculty and say, oh, this person is researching and studying what I'm interested in. I want to work with that person. I want that person to be my mentor and my advisor. So some programs you need to contact that faculty member ahead of time. So you would email them, you would tell them that you're interested in a PhD, and I recommend that you do some research about what they have, and you want to butter them up, we say, where you tell them what you like about their research and why you want to be involved in their laboratory, and ask if they are looking for students. And then there'll be an agreement to say, yes, I will take you on as a PhD student, and then you apply to your program. Other graduate programs, you don't need to do that ahead of time. So you still want to do your research to make sure that the program that you're entering covers the topic that you're interested in and that you could work with somebody like that. But some programs you go into the master's or the PhD, and then maybe in the first year you start making connections with faculty members. Or sometimes it's assigned to you. The faculty member is assigned to you depending on what you're interested in. So the nice thing at the graduate level, usually those opportunities are given to you in a sense, but you would need to work ahead of time to make that connection. And then what I recommend for master's students, and sometimes PhD, is some programs for masters, it's not guaranteed that you'll have a paid research position, but you still want to do a thesis, which would be the research. So you need to find a lab to work in. I highly recommend just start getting the experience. So if there's not any open positions for master's students in a lab, still just volunteer and start participating in that lab. You don't know which students are going to leave eventually. If you're doing a good job, there might be a paid position in the future. If not, you're getting that hands-on practical experience for you for when you're finishing your degree. So for research, again, there's opportunities where you sometimes have to seek them and sometimes they come to you. But the nice thing about engineering is almost all opportunities you're going to find a lab to work in.
Exactly. Yes. I would like to tell the audience here that we saw that there were a question popped up, but please keep in the question box. We'll have those questions answered. We'll attend all the questions. Do not worry. All right. Please keep typing them. My next question, Lindsay, is that I'm sure you have dealt with a lot of international students. You have talked to them. You have seen them, how they are progressing in the campus, and obviously have worked with a model, right? What is your advice for the international student? What sort of expectation they should come with? What sort of adaptation they should be doing when they're in the campus? What do you see are the opportunities for them? What is your overall advice for the international students who will be going to any US universities or OSU?
Yes. So my first recommendation, which I would give to an international student or a student from the US, is make sure that you really take that time for work-life balance. Graduate school can be very stressful, and you need to be able to make sure that you're doing the work needed to complete your degree, but also make sure you're taking care of your mental health, which means take the time to determine a time that you're not going to be working in your lab or doing homework, and you're just going to go for a walk or do some kind of activity that you enjoy doing. So there's a professor at the University of Arizona who said this, and it made some good sense, is he said, whether you're the first or the last person in your graduating class for a PhD, as long as you meet the requirements, you have a PhD. So I know, especially in South Asia, it's very, very competitive in schools sometimes where you have to be number one. And if you're not number one, there's nothing that comes from that. So make sure that you're taking that time again to balance. You obviously want to do well in your studies, but it's not the end of the world if you're not number one in your class. You're still getting a master's or a PhD from the United States. You can still have a strong CGPA when going and looking in the workforce. So that's my first point. I made some notes here, let's see. Another big thing in the US is, especially at big public universities, we have about 35,000 students on our campus. So we're a big school, but that also means we have lots and lots of different resources available for students. And actually we had, when I went to Bangladesh a while back, there was an international student who came for his undergraduate. And that was one of the recommendations I said to him, is I said, there's tons of resources here, but nobody's going to come to you and say, here's this resource, here's this resource. You have to actively go and look for those things. But for example, we have a graduate writing center, which is available to students. So if you're not feeling comfortable with the paper that you wrote, or you're starting to write your thesis and you want to have another opinion from it, we have a writing center available to you. We have CAPS, which is basically opportunities if you are feeling too stressed out, or you're feeling that you just need somebody to talk to. We have the library with a lot of different things. We have the graduate school. So be aware that those resources are there and use them. And another thing that I would say for international students is, in a lot of countries, it's disrespectful to question your professor or to approach them. You might look weak if you're asking questions. In the United States, it's a complete opposite. Faculty actually really enjoy if you go to their office hours. If you ask those questions, they'd rather you ask the questions and just kind of feel lost. That's what they're there for. So don't be afraid if you're in a class and you're having a hard time to go to the office hours of the faculty member. It doesn't make you weak. It actually shows that you have initiative to learn the subject and to be strong. So that's a big difference that I've seen from a lot of other countries coming to the United States, is feeling that they're scared to talk to faculty. Don't be afraid to do that. Let's see if and I guess the last thing is, coming to a new country can be is a culture shock. You're already adjusting to a new school system. You're adjusting to being in a graduate program. So what I recommend is finding ways to feel at home wherever you end up. So take some photos of family members or little trinkets that you have from your home country. Make a meal that makes you happy. Also get connected with other students on campus who maybe are from a similar part of the world from you. Obviously, the great thing about universities in the US is there's students from all over. So I encourage students to meet people from all over the world, because that's one of the great opportunities that you have. But usually there are cultural clubs that are available at different universities. So for example, at Oregon State, we have the Etihad Center, which is a center for students who come from the Middle East, South Asia, Central Asia, where they're just able to connect with each other, share culture, do performances for the rest of the university. So find ways to connect and find ways to feel at home, even though you're in a completely different home for that time.
Exactly. Lot of interesting thing. Yeah, we keep saying these things to students, but I mean, it's very important that when you go as an international student to a US institution, you take the opportunity and make as many friends from as many countries, because this is a rare opportunity, and you might not get this sort of opportunity ever again. US is a country of diversity. You will see so many people from so many countries, and it will be wonderful if you just go to them, approach them, and talk to them. And most of the people are very nice and friendly. Go make friends with them, learn about their culture, learn about their religion, learn about their food, everything you can learn within your program, right? And I especially I tell the undergrad student, if you being judgmental to fellow international student, you'll be in the same spot. So do not, I think it's not a problem usually with the master's student, but undergrad student, they are still young. So thank you, Lindsay, for wonderful approach. I love the way you answered the last question. Now, we are getting few questions, and we are also at almost in our question answer session. So what are the best things in OSU? Would you say why the student should come to OSU?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really appreciate about Oregon State, so I came from a city that had about 500,000 people, which actually is a decent size in the US, to Oregon State, which is in Corvallis, which actually has 60,000 people. So it's a lot smaller than where I lived before. But I'm appreciating that because it's a very close community. And also for people who, the city basically revolves around the university. So when I say close community, it doesn't just mean people who are born and raised here in Corvallis. It's anybody who goes to the institution. And so I really appreciate that there's that support of community, no matter where you're from here. And I also appreciate that they're very environmentally conscious. So there's a lot of recycling programs. You'll see people walking and running and being outside and just trying to support each other. And it's also the Pacific Northwest. So the states of like Oregon and Washington, both are just so beautiful. I am an hour drive from the beach. There's mountains next to me. There's forests. The other really cool thing is there's berries just like freely growing by my apartment. So I'll go pick raspberries and cherries and things like that. So just the outdoors there is really impressive. And it's a really supportive university as well. The president has been there for 14 years, which is really not very usual in the United States. And our new president, he's retiring, but our new president is somebody who's also very dedicated to the students and comes from a background from student support, which I think is important. That was something that drew me to go and work at this university, because I think that's very important, is that the student is first. You're paying money to attend this institution. We want to make sure that you're getting the support that you need.
Amazing, wonderful. I wanted to ask you that Oregon is considered as a suburban area or rural, urban. Which kind of area it would fall into in the category?
Yeah, so it depends on where you are. So by the university in Corvallis, it feels like a suburban area. So you'll see quite a bit of houses. We do have some big name restaurants and grocery stores. We also have a lot of local, but we also are big for agriculture. So we have lots of engineering. We are considered a land grant institution. And so this was something from late 1800s, where the United States granted different states like a university that focuses in agriculture. So Oregon State started as an agriculture school. So you'll see that we have tons of different programs for that as well. And one of the things that I enjoy is you can actually buy local meat, cheese, produce that's grown by Oregon State students. And so, again, very environmentally conscious. I know where my food comes from.
That's wonderful. I remember that I part of the campus visit, I went to a college who were specialized in winery. They had vineyard, and it was amazing. And I remember when Yeah, exactly. It was amazing. It was so beautiful. And
Yeah.
when we were in a hotel and we had a free day, so I was just roaming around and I went out the hotel and I saw there were so many multi cuisine. And I remember I had my first lunch, Japanese rice ball, and it was amazing. And I think there are a lot of farmers market too, right?
Oh, there's a huge farmers market in Corvallis downtown. And I guess another thing that I would say, especially if for students coming from bigger towns or bigger town cities like Dhaka, is you're going to notice the quiet that you're going to have
Yeah.
coming to a school like Oregon State. And that's something that it takes a little bit of time to get used to, but you start to appreciate that.
It is a
Um,
good change. It is an
yeah,
absolutely a good change. I know for the
it
fact
helps
I
you
had to.
mentally sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I wanted to ask you that for a master's student, if they're selecting their university, how does it matter if it's a public or private university? Does it really matter?
It I guess it depends on the program. So public
Right.
institutions are usually bigger. Um, there's a different tuition rate for students who are from that state and then students who are from out of state. So, for example, at Oregon State, if you're somebody who's a resident, U.S. citizen or green card holder who their primary home is in Oregon, they get a different rate than somebody who's from New York or from Dhaka. Um, so you'll see a difference in rate there, but when it comes to funding, again, if you get an assistantship or fellowship, everything's covered anyway, so it doesn't matter. Private schools are usually smaller, and their tuition can be more, but they might have more opportunities for scholarships. So it's really looking at both private and public, and just seeing your specific program that you're interested in, what is offered to you, and you want to look at the whole package. So again, what is the tuition? What is the cost of living? What is the scholarships? I have the sun coming right in my face on a certain spot. What are the
It looks nice.
scholarships that are available? And then also think about your personal, security. Do you want to be in a small program or a small university? Even if you're at a big school, there might only be 10 people in your cohort, or but there's still going to be all those other students on campus. So I recommend looking at both. There's benefits and disadvantages to both. It's really what's going to be the best overall fit for you.
All right. So I think we are done with our question and answer. Thank you, Lindsay, so much. There have been so many good points and advice from you. This is the question we got earlier. Mahin, can we have the questions asked by Nabil? I think it was just here, now it's gone. Yeah. So the question is, my TOEFL score will expire on November 2020. I'm planning to apply for fall 2021. Now, if I complete my application before November 2020, should I face any problem or I need to give TOEFL again? Do you want to take it, Lindsay?
Sure. So again, you'll just want to check with the institution that you're applying to and the program that you're applying to. Usually if you submit everything and it's within the 2 years of the application deadline, you'll be okay. Some might say, no, we want it by this certain date. So just check with the institution that you're interested in. You're pretty close, and November 2020 would have it be in the right timing. So if you are applying, since again, usually December is the main deadline. So just double check with the program that you're applying to and make sure that's something that they are okay with.
Yeah, I would like to add, Nabil, that November is pretty much early for graduate program application. So what might happen that the portal might not be even open for you to apply in few institutions. So they usually start a bit late. So for a fall program, November might be a bit early. So I would say just get done with it if you think that it might be a bit risky. But I know that at this moment, giving a standardized test can be a matter of concern. So one way to deal with it if you have already a list of institution where you want to apply, or if you have some rough, just send them an email asking them, hey, I have given the TOEFL 2 3 years back and it's gonna expire. For this fall, for fall 2021, there might be rules which are not as strict as it would be for a different session. So they might be telling you that yes, it's absolutely all right, we accept that, and that would be your email you want to get in your hand before you're applying. So just ask your institution like Lindsay asked you. All right. Okay. Uh, Tafim has asked, which one is much beneficial, fellowship or assistantship? What are the general requirements for the direct PhD program after Bachelor for engineering student? I think it's your question to take, Lindsay.
Sure. So I think they are equally beneficial, the fellowship and assistantship. Nice thing about in a fellowship is it's kind of guaranteed as long as you stay with the requirements. Assistantship, again, is employment. So if you're not producing what you need, there's a possibility that, that employment would end. I don't usually see that being an issue. So I think if you're able to secure either a fellowship or an assistantship, you're in a good position, because again, you're getting those three main benefits. It depends on the university, but usually it is the tuition is covered, the health insurance is covered, and you get a stipend for both of those. So if you get either opportunity, I say go for it. And then what are general requirements for direct PhD? You'll want to check with the program again to see if they admit directly from bachelor's to PhD. A lot of programs will in engineering, but just double check that that's something that you don't need a master's to do. You are going to be considered like somebody who already has a master's degree. When I worked in optical sciences, I sat on the admissions committee, and we equally had students who had both just a bachelor's and a master's. Something that admissions committees really like to see in STEM is that you've had some research experience. So if you're able to do that, whether it's volunteer or through your classes, or to do a publishing, it's not required to do a publishing, but try to get as much hands-on experience as possible to be able to put on your CV. And another important thing is, we kind of talked about earlier, is just make sure that you're taking time in all aspects of your application. And the letters of recommendation are important. Make sure that you have somebody who can vouch for the fact that you would be successful in graduate school. Try to find a professor or somebody who knows who you are, not just, oh, yes, this person was in my class of 200 and I think they did okay in the class. Like, make sure it's somebody who can actually talk about who you are as a person. And then the last thing, recommendation is with your SOP, with your statement of purpose. I've seen this a lot, where somebody will write one SOP for all the programs that they apply to. And it's very obvious that your blanket, it's a blanket statement for all universities. So take the time to actually make the SOPs specific to the program that you're applying. Admissions committees really like to see that.
Exactly. Absolutely. Next question is, Mamun have asked almost the same question. I have done my BSc, now I want to directly apply for PhD, will be a problem. I'll take it. Like Lindsay, I have been telling you that it absolutely depends on the specific program and specific university. And also you need to understand the fact that for PhD program, you need to have some certain requirement done. PhD program is very difficult to get in. I mean, even to be considered for admission, you need to have proper research program done, or project paper done, or thesis done. If the university wants you to give an opportunity for you, or create an opportunity for you to do some research, they would want to see that you've already done some research and you already have some professional experience, related professional experience. So I would say that if you think that you have those things under your belt, and also the fact that you have already checked with the institution that they are taking students directly from bachelor's to PhD, just go ahead and apply. Otherwise, doing a master's or applying for master's might be a good idea, right? Next question is,
Let me just
please,
add really
if you want to,
really fast on that.
yes, please.
And a lot of programs too will, if you apply to the PhD, if you're not selected for the PhD, they'll consider you for the master's degree automatically. So check with that. You don't want to do 2 applications when you only have to pay for one.
Exactly.
And it's not guaranteed. That's the other thing. But I've seen students who were given that offer, they didn't get into the PhD program right away, so they accepted the master's offer, and then a year later they applied again for the PhD and they got in. So take advantage of those opportunities. If you don't get into a PhD program, take an offer for a master's program and work really hard so you can later apply again for that PhD.
All right. Next is a very interesting question. Thanks for asking, Partho. You are studying computer engineering, computer science, and engineering, and now you want to study economics. What would be your requirement? Addition. I will give a short answer, and then I'll request Lindsay to talk about it. US is a country, they will never tell you you cannot study this, regardless of subject, age, gender, anything. So you have studied anything and you want to study anything, they would absolutely appreciate. However, they will check that if you have the prerequisites or not for studying a master's. So they might ask you to do some added subject. That should be the extent to it. Otherwise, you should be welcome to study this. What's your input in this, Lindsay?
I agree. One of the nice things about the U.S., starting from a bachelor's degree and then also into graduate programs, is, in a lot of countries, you start in high school, you do a science track, and you always have to do science all the way through. In the U.S., you can change. Exactly. As mentioned, sometimes there might be, look at the requirements for that program. The good thing coming from engineering to economics is it's strong in math. And that's something they're really looking for in economics. So look at what their program requirements are, but it's totally possible to go from computer engineering and then study a PhD in economics. As long as you meet the minimum requirements, go for it.
But let me tell you something, Partho. Your SOP will be very, very important when you are making this switch, because the admission department or your professor would want to know that why you're making such a switch, right? So please, when you're writing your SOP, make sure that you give some extra lines explaining why did you take this decision, and also what sort of career you are looking from a bachelor's from computer engineering and doing a master's in economics. What you have in your mind, share with them, and if it's inspiring, your SOP, if it's good, they will be happy to take a student like you, right? Thank you so much.
And then personal is I did my bachelor's degree in political science and French, and my master's degree is in educational psychology. So that's an example of how different they can be.
There you go. Exactly. So Mahin, do you have any more question, or we should call it an end? Okay. How much impact of volunteering club activities for getting fellowship, assistantship, getting scholarship? Do you want to answer that, Lindsay?
Sure.
It might not be that relevant, but yeah.
Yeah, so you'll see that sometimes volunteering or club activities can be helpful. I will say that's usually more impactful when you're applying for a bachelor's program compared to master's. Master's, they want to make sure that you're able to do the work. So they're looking more at how did you perform in school? How did you do any kind of research ahead of time? So if it's volunteering or club activities, like let's say the engineering club, then that's something it's definitely worth putting on your CV. But again, they're going to be focusing more on, can you do the work? But sometimes there are scholarships that are specific, or fellowships that are specific to the kind of humanitarian or extracurricular work that you've done. So it doesn't hurt to keep those in mind as well. But I would say a majority of the time at the graduate level, the volunteering and club activities of, just helping the community won't play as big of a role as maybe it would have at the undergraduate level. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, fellowship and assistantship is actually a bigger game, and they would want to see that you have some academically strong strength, or your research work, or teaching assistant. If you have some teaching experience, those would be helpful. For masters, your ECA needs to be related relevant to your program, it will have more impact. Yes, it will show that you've been proactive, you've been productive, and you had your time used with a good background. But if you can show the relevancy with your program, with your ECA, that would be more impactful. And that's what we usually tell our students when they are mentioning ECA with their master's program. So please think that how it been impactful. Again, writing about it in your SOP would be an advantage. But I would say, fellowship sounds so amazing that you don't have to work, but you need to understand it's equally competitive and equally challenging to get into a fellowship, because fellowship is the only thing which usually covers health benefits, living. Usually the assistantship doesn't cover those. So you have to have something very strong within your application package, which will help you to get fellowships. All right. So I think we have come to the end. I'd like to thank ESAB and I would like to thank Lindsay so much for joining us. And somehow your cats behaved. They didn't come to the they didn't come to the video at all. I'm sure the students were waiting to see a glimpse, but next time maybe. Any last line advice for the student, and you can say goodbye to all the students who've been listening to us.
Sure. You'll hear this a lot from US universities, but again, really just find the program that's the best fit for you. And so sometimes a program will be #1 or a top ranked program, even though the university is not #1. So keep that in mind. Or sometimes it's not the #1 program, but it meets all the needs of what you're looking for. So it's supportive, it's giving you the money that you need, you're getting the hands-on experience. So really keep your mind open to lots of opportunities. I think there's like 4,000 or 5,000 universities in the United States. There's so many, which can be a little daunting, but pick the one that's going to help you achieve your goals. And I think you can't go wrong.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. So if you have any further question to Lindsay or me, just knock ESAB. They will give our email address. And stay safe, stay home. That's our advice. Unfortunately, we are not getting to a place where we can say that we are getting better yet. And have a good day, Lindsay. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you for letting me speak. I really appreciate it.
Good night and good day.